Modern critical social theory faces a severe structural problem. Even as scholars argue for more intersectional and multicultural frameworks, the dominant analytical engines remain deeply isolated within a Eurocentric classical Marxist lineage. In academic circles, the term critical theory is almost universally assumed to be synonymous with the Frankfurt School, pointing to figures like Max Horkheimer and his European contemporaries as the definitive architects. This creates a rigid intellectual hierarchy, assuming Black radical thought borrows validity from European giants. But zooming out reveals historical data omitted from the European story. Centuries of imperialism, chattel slavery, and anti-colonial resistance generated rigorous theoretical analysis long before the Frankfurt School convened. Africana critical theory functions as an independent analytical tradition, predating the Frankfurt School and specifically targeting the theoretical blind spots inherent in European models. The progenitors of this tradition built comprehensive socio-political systems. Thinkers like W.E.B. Du Bois were diagnosing overlapping mechanics of race, class, and colonial power decades prior to the formal establishment of critical theory. Figures like Frantz Fanon expanded this architecture across the diaspora, analyzing the deep psychological and material realities of colonial violence in ways European theorists simply could not access. If theory is meant to be a practical instrument for material liberation, rather than an abstract philosophical exercise, we have to dismantle that original Eurocentric hierarchy entirely. To understand why a separate framework is necessary, we have to isolate the precise mechanical failure in the traditional model, the theoretical breaking point between classical white Marxism and Black radicalism. Classical Marxism heavily privileges class conflict and the economic alienation of the industrial worker as the primary engines of history. In this framework, it consistently reduces race to a secondary byproduct of economic forces. That hierarchy of variables breaks down immediately when applied to the unmediated, distinctly racialized oppression experienced by enslaved and colonized populations. For the colonized, oppression took the form of literal physical boundaries, structural segregation, and race-based laws enforced through direct material violence. When overlapping historical crises like transatlantic enslavement and Jim Crow are funneled through a single restrictive class structure filter, the specific variables of race and colonial domination are flattened and erased. A historical materialist framework that ignores the distinct political economy of white supremacy cannot accurately map modern systems of domination. It requires an entirely different mapping tool. Correcting this analytical failure requires fixing a massive historiographical error regarding the origins of critical sociology. We can test the assumption of European primacy by simply plotting the chronological data of the Frankfurt School's founders against the rigorous academic output of W.E.B. Du Bois. Max Horkheimer, the oldest member of the Frankfurt School, was born in 1895. In that exact same year, W.E.B. Du Bois was receiving his PhD from Harvard, already executing foundational interdisciplinary community studies that would lead to his publication of The Philadelphia Negro. Du Bois was not waiting for European permission to critique society. He was actively synthesizing history, economics, sociology, and political theory into a cohesive methodology decades before the phrase critical theory existed in the European Academy. This timeline emerges from a completely different archive of human knowledge. It is an archive built directly from the lived experiences, cultural formations, and specific material struggles of continental and diasporan Africans fighting against imperialism. This temporal precedence proves that Du Bois's methodologies grew out of an entirely separate intellectual and material ecosystem. He was not refining European theory, he was constructing a primary toolset derived from the specific crises of the African diaspora. So, how exactly does this independent framework function? Africana critical theory operates on a few distinct structural mechanics. The first mechanism is the dialectics of deconstruction and reconstruction. It breaks down oppressive ideological narratives while simultaneously building up rigorous, historically grounded alternatives. The second mechanism is the dialectics of domination and liberation. It systematically isolates the specific pressure points of discrimination to engineer practical pathways out of them. To run these mechanics, the theory has to abandon traditional academic borders. Conventional disciplines like sociology, philosophy, and history typically operate as isolated silos, unable to capture the deeply entangled reality of systemic oppression. The Africana framework employs transdisciplinarity, dissolving the borders between academic silos to build a horizontal, highly integrated analytical matrix. Because the reality of the Black subject involves navigating racism, sexism, and capitalist exploitation simultaneously, any tool used to analyze that reality must weave those exact variables into a single cohesive map. This brings us to the operational directive outlined by the revolutionary Amilcar Cabral. Theory must function as a weapon. Within this framework, theory completely rejects political neutrality. It is an active instrument, selected and optimized to attack specific targets of domination and advance actual material liberation struggles. Because its ultimate goal is practical liberation, Africana critical theory maintains a posture of rigorous epistemic openness. It does not reject Marxist or European thought out of hand. Despite its severe critiques of class reductionism, the framework values any analytical device that correctly diagnoses exploitation. Instead of discarding the entire system, the Africana theoretical engine extracts specific tool modules from European models, like the critique of surplus value, while completely rejecting the restrictive filters that erase racial dynamics. These appropriated concepts are then recalibrated. They are integrated into a framework strictly dedicated to analyzing colonial structures and advancing revolutionary decolonization. This process underscores a core tenet. Africana critical theory completely rejects thought for thought's sake as an abstract academic indulgence. The validity of these transdisciplinary concepts is proven only when they translate directly out of the academy and into material action and mass social movements. Its ultimate users are the organic intellectuals and organizers on the ground, individuals actively seeking precise, functional tools to dismantle overlapping systems of modern imperialism. By centering the lived struggles of the racially marginalized and colonized, this tradition provides the historically grounded roadmap required to dismantle overlapping systems of imperialism and reconstruct radical politics for the 21st century.